Electrosaurus moved like a shadow across the vast plains where silence ruled the dawn. Its lean body carried both speed and power, its amber eyes fixed on the horizon. Every step pressed purpose into the earth, whispering of a predator honed by time. Small creatures scattered before it, sensing the storm that followed in its wake. Above, the sky burned red as the first light stretched across jagged cliffs. To witness Electrosaurus was to witness balance between grace and savagery. It was not just another hunter of the ancient world. It was a living force sculpted for survival. The land stretched wide beneath an endless sky, painted with the colors of morning. Rolling plains gave way to broken cliffs and deep ravines carved by rivers that had flowed since ages before memory. Forests spread in patches, each alive with 1,000 sounds of insects, birds, and hidden creatures. This world was not gentle. It was fierce and untamed, shaped by hunger, storms, and survival. Yet within this wild stage, every creature had a role to play, and none more striking than the predator, who now moved silently along the edge of a ridge. Electrosaurus carried itself with a grace that belied its strength. Its body, long and lean, was built for speed. Muscles coiled beneath scaled skin, its tail sweeping in careful rhythm as it walked. The head, narrow yet powerful, turned slowly as golden eyes scanned the ground below. Each movement spoke of a predator that had learned patience, for patience was the difference between survival and starvation. The world offered no kindness. It offered only chances, and those who seized them endured. From the ridge, the predator looked across the plain, where a herd of small plant-eaters grazed near a stream. Their necks stretched low to the grass, their ears twitching at every sound. They lived in fear of hunters like Electrosaurus, for though larger predators roamed this land, few could match the deadly combination of speed and precision it carried. The wind shifted, bringing the scent of the herd toward the hunter. It lingered for a long moment, breathing in the trace of prey, its nostrils flaring. Hunger tightened within its belly, but the time was not yet right. Hunting was never only about strength. It was about calculation. Electrosaurus lowered its head and descended from the ridge, its steps silent among loose stones. Each stride, placed with care, avoided sound, avoided attention. This was the life of a predator bound to instincts older than the mountains themselves. It knew the herd would scatter if it charged too soon. It knew patience meant victory and haste meant failure. The forest edge welcomed it with shade. Tall ferns brushed against its legs, leaves shivering as it moved. The air within the trees carried different scents, richer earth damp with the musk of smaller creatures hidden in the undergrowth. Birds fluttered high in the branches, calling warnings, yet the herd below the ridge had not noticed. Electrosaurus paused again, watching. Its eyes narrowed upon a younger, weaker animal at the edge of the group. That was the one, the perfect target. Still, it did not rush. Instead, it studied the ground, the slope, the way the herd shifted, and the way shadows fell across the grass. Each detail mattered. A misstep could mean nothing to eat for days. The predator crouched to lower its breath, steady its tail stiff for balance. This world had given rise to many hunters, yet few bore the skill of Electrosaurus. It was not the largest, not the most fearsome in raw power, but it was built for cunning. Where larger predators crashed through prey with sheer force, Electrosaurus relied on speed, agility, and calculation. Its long legs could carry it in sudden bursts. Its narrow skull could strike with accuracy. What it lacked in size, it made up in strategy. The herd grazed unaware, yet the land itself betrayed them. A flock of birds suddenly rose from the far side of the plain, their cries sharp against the still morning. The herd lifted their heads, their bodies tense. The moment had shifted, balance broken. Electrosaurus sensed a change and acted. It burst in the shadows like lightning, tail snapping, legs driving forward with explosive force. Grass and soil tore beneath its weight as it closed the distance with terrifying speed. The herd panicked, scattering in every direction, hooves pounding across the plain. Dust rose in choking clouds, yet the predator did not falter. Its eyes locked on the chosen target, the young one that struggled to keep up. Every muscle strained, every breath thundered as the chase narrowed. The smaller creature zigzagged, desperate to escape, but Electrosaurus matched its moves, turning with sharp grace. The ground echoed with their race predator, and prey locked in a dance as old as life itself. At last the predator struck, jaws snapping shut around the neck of its quarry. The struggle ended in a heartbeat silence following the chaos. Electrosaurus stood over its prized chest, heaving body glistening in the morning light. For a time it remained still, head lowered over the fallen animal. The herd had vanished, leaving behind only torn grass and fading echoes. The predator tore into flesh not in rage but in necessity. Each bite was survival, each swallow life, earned through patient skill and instinct. The cycle continued as it always had. When the hunger eased, the predator lifted its head once more. Blood stained its jaws, the scent of victory heavy in the air. Yet its eyes did not only reflect satisfaction. They reflected awareness. The land was never empty for long. Other predators lurked, always waiting for weakness, always ready to steal a kill. The meal had to be finished quickly or abandoned if challenge came. That was the law of this age. The sun climbed higher, burning mist away from the lowlands. Insects swarmed, drawn to the kill as Electrosaurus fed. Far in the distance, a low rumble carried through the air the sound of something massive moving unseen beyond the hills. The predator froze, ears tilting toward the sound. It was not alone. It would never be alone. The days passed, and the plains shifted under the cycle of sun and storm. Electrosaurus moved with the rhythm of the land, never staying in one place too long. The hunt that had fed at dawn was only the beginning, for hunger was a fire that always returned. Yet survival was not only a matter of eating. It was a matter of enduring the countless dangers that hid within this world. The predator traveled through forests where shadows whispered and rivers carved deep valleys. Insects buzzed like static in the air, while small reptiles darted among roots. Each sound told a story. Each scent carried a warning. Electrosaurus had learned to listen. The earth spoke if one knew how to hear. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, the predator reached a vast plain unlike the sheltered valley it had left behind. Here the grass grew tall, bending in the wind like waves upon a sea. Herds of plant-eaters gathered in numbers far greater than before. Massive shapes lumbered slowly across the distance, their bodies armored with plates, their tails swinging like clubs. These were not the small and easy prey of earlier hunts. These were titans, and hunting them would mean certain death. Electrosaurus crouched in the grass, its eyes scanning the movement of the herd. It was not foolish enough to attack such giants. Instead, it searched the edges for smaller animals, for the weak ones who strayed too far. Yet the herd moved tightly together, protected by sheer size and unity. The predator's hunger gnawed, but its patience held. To strike without wisdom would end in broken bones and silence. Night fell, and the stars unveiled themselves across the endless sky. The predator lingered near the plain, though it did not attempt to hunt. Instead, it rested beneath the cover of trees, its body curled tight, its mind alert even in sleep. Dreams were not gentle. They carried the scent of rivals and the sound of roars echoing through memory. When dawn came, the air carried a new smell, sharp and dangerous. Electrosaurus lifted its head and growled low in its throat. The wind brought more than prey. It brought the scent of another predator. The ground quivered slightly as heavy steps drew near. A silhouette emerged upon the ridge opposite the plain, a rival far larger and broader than Electrosaurus. It was Tarbosaurus, a giant hunter, whose jaws could crush bone with ease. Its presence alone shifted the balance of the land. Herds stirred nervously, aware of the shadow now cast across their world. Electrosaurus held still, body low and silent. To reveal itself would invite death. Tarbosaurus roared, its voice shaking the air. Birds scattered into the sky. The herd bunched closer, moving as a wall of flesh and muscle. The giant predator advanced with no fear, its stride confident, its size unmatched. Yet Electrosaurus did not retreat. Hidden in the grass, it observed, learning. Patience was not weakness. Patience was wisdom. Tarbosaurus might claim the herd, but it would leave scraps. Electrosaurus could survive not by confronting giants, but by mastering the spaces between them. Still, the presence of such a rival meant danger. The smaller predator would have to move carefully. The plain could no longer be trusted as safe ground. The following days brought storms that drenched the land. Rain lashed across the forest, turning the soil to mud and rivers into torrents. Electrosaurus endured, seeking shelter beneath fallen trees and caves of stone. Lightning carved the sky in blinding flashes, each crack followed by thunder that shook the earth. In those moments, the predator felt small yet unbroken. Storms were as much a part of life as hunger. When the rain ceased, the land smelled of renewal. Fresh plants sprouted where the water had flowed, and prey returned to graze. Yet so did predators. Hunger was sharpened by storms, and now every hunter sought its chance. Electrosaurus prowled the forest edge where smaller creatures gathered. Its amber eyes tracked a group of young hadrosaurs that strayed too far from their mothers. These were better targets than armored titans, and far safer than the giants claimed by Tarbosaurus. The predator lowered itself, pressing against the damp earth, muscles tense, ready for the sudden burst. But before it could strike, the forest erupted with chaos. A pack of raptors leapt from the undergrowth, their shrill cries piercing the morning. They swarmed the hadrosaurs, slicing with sickle claws, their strategy ruthless. The prey screamed, the forest alive with sound. Electrosaurus paused, watching the frenzy unfold. To charge now would mean conflict with the pack. Raptors were smaller, but their numbers made them dangerous. A lone one was no threat. Together they were death. Electrosaurus stepped back, its instincts guiding it toward survival rather than reckless combat. The kill belonged to them. It would wait for another chance. Yet the chance came sooner than expected. Hours later, as the pack fed, their cries echoed far. A shadow fell across them, and from the ridge emerged Tarbosaurus once more. The raptors scattered their unity, breaking against the weight of fear. Tarbosaurus advanced, jaws opening wide, crushing one of the hadrosaurs in an instant. The pack vanished into the trees, leaving their meal behind. Electrosaurus lingered in silence as the giant fed. Then, as shadows stretched across the land and Tarbosaurus finally moved away, the smaller predator descended. It did not roar, it did not rush. It simply claimed what little remained. This was survival. Not every victory was loud. Some were quiet, unseen, yet equally vital. Days turned to weeks, and the land shifted with each new challenge. Electrosaurus grew leaner, sharper, honed by trials. It crossed rivers, hunted in forests, and climbed ridges that overlooked the endless plains. Each step tested it, each hunt shaped it further. Yet rivals pressed closer. The scent of raptors was common now. The shadow of Tarbosaurus lingered always. Even smaller predators stalked the land, forcing Electrosaurus to remain vigilant. There was no peace, only moments of rest between storms. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long, Electrosaurus found itself upon a cliff that overlooked the valley below. Herds grazed in the fading light, and far beyond them a dark shape moved across the plain. Tarbosaurus again. Yet this time the giant was not alone. Another shadow approached from the opposite direction, smaller yet strong. Electrosaurus realized what it watched was no hunt, but a clash. Tarbosaurus roared, shaking the ground. The rival answered with equal fury. Dust rose as titans moved toward each other. The herd scattered, fleeing in terror. The valley trembled with the coming storm of giants. From its vantage point, Electrosaurus remained still. It would not intervene. This was not its battle. Yet to witness such power was to understand fragility of life. Even predators were prey to something greater. The clash began with shattering sound of bone and flesh colliding. The two predators slammed together, each strike echoing like thunder. Teeth sank into flesh, tails whipped through the air, claws toward scales. Blood sprayed across the plain as titans fought for dominance. The land bore scars from their rage. The valley lay in silence after the storms of battle. Dust still drifted through the air from where Tarbosaurus and its rival had torn the land apart. Blood stained the grass and dark rivers. The herds had fled long before leaving emptiness in their wake. It was into this silence that Electrosaurus stepped, lean and sharp, a survivor drawn to the edges of destruction. Its amber eyes scanned the valley, noting every detail. The bodies of the giants lay collapsed, their wounds fatal, their power spent. Even the earth seemed wounded, scarred by claws and tails. The air was thick with the stench of death, yet within that smell was opportunity. To feast upon the remains of giants was rare and dangerous. It promised strength, but it also promised risk. Electrosaurus descended carefully, each step silent, each muscle taut. Its instincts warned that silence did not mean safety. The world was never empty for long. Predators always lurked, shadows always waited. As it reached the valley floor, it lowered its head to the carcass of the smaller rival, whose flesh had not been fully consumed. Hunger pushed against caution, and with steady bites the predator fed. The meat was rich, heavy with life that had burned hot before it ended. Each mouthful restored a fire in Electrosaurus's body, fueling strength for trials yet to come. Yet even as it fed, its senses stayed sharp. The rustle of wings drew its eyes upward as scavenger birds circled overhead, their calls harsh and greedy. The silence broke with a sound that froze the air. A deep growl rolled across the valley, not from the fallen, but from the trees beyond. Electrosaurus raised its head, muscles stiff its throat, rumbling in answer. From the shadows stepped another predator, not Tarbosaurus, not raptors, but one of its own kind. Another Electrosaurus leaned strong and scarred. The two locked eyes, and in that instant the valley became smaller. There was no space for both. Hunger drove them both to the carcass, yet survival demanded that only one could remain. They circled the fallen giant, each step deliberate, each gaze unbroken. The rival struck first, lunging with teeth bared. Electrosaurus leapt aside, claws scraping across its opponent's flank. The air filled with roars sharp and violent. Dust rose around them as they clashed their bodies, slamming together, their jaws snapping for the throat. Each strike carried desperation, for this was not a battle of dominance alone. It was survival. The rival lunged again, jaws catching the edge of Electrosaurus's shoulder. Pain shot through its body, hot and burning. With a furious twist, it tore free, leaving blood streaking down its scales. Rage replaced hesitation. It countered with speed, its jaws snapping down on the rival's tail, tearing flesh in a savage rip. The cry that followed shook the valley, sending scavengers scattering. They broke apart for only a breath, circling once more their bodies, heaving their eyes wild. The carcass lay between them, a prize worth blood and bone. The rival charged, its weight slamming into Electrosaurus, driving it back toward the carcass of the giant. The smaller predator stumbled, its claws scrabbling against torn earth. Teeth snapped inches from its throat. With a surge, Electrosaurus twisted, slamming its claws into the rival's side, dragging deep lines across muscle. The rival howled, staggering back, yet not defeated. They clashed again, bodies colliding in a frenzy of power and desperation. Blood sprayed across the grass, each wound deepening their fury. The world narrowed to the sound of roars, the crash of bodies, and the taste of blood. The valley itself seemed to tremble under the storm of their conflict. Every strike carried the weight of survival. Every roar echoed with defiance. Neither yielded, neither faltered. But in the chaos, one found its moment. As the rival lunged, jaws wide, Electrosaurus dropped low, its muscles coiled like a spring. With a burst of speed, it drove upward, its teeth sinking deep into rival's neck. The force carried them both to the ground, rolling across the blood-soaked earth. The rival thrashed, claws raking, scales, teeth snapping, but the hold did not break. Electrosaurus tightened, its jaws, every muscle burning with effort. The rival's roars grew weaker, its strikes losing strength, until at last silence spread across the valley once more. The predator released its hold, stepping back, its body heaving, its scales streaked with blood, both its own and its rival's. It stood over the fallen, its eyes burning with victory. Yet the cost was carved into its flesh. Deep wounds bled, freely, pain seared with every breath. The battle had been won, but the trial was not over. Survival was never granted, only earned again and again. The carcass of the rival lay beside the carcass of the giant titans, a grim testament to the savagery of the world. Electrosaurus roared to the sky, a sound raw and defiant, echoing across cliffs and ridges. The scavenger bird circled, but did not descend. The valley belonged to the victor. It fed then, though each movement brought pain. Every bite was a reminder of the cost, yet also of the reward. Strength filled its body, even as exhaustion pulled at its bones. The fire of survival burned brighter, forged in the storm of battle. When the sun dipped low, casting the valley in gold, Electrosaurus stood tall, its silhouette sharp against the horizon. It had faced rival, and giant had endured storm and hunger. It was scarred yet alive. In its eyes there was no triumph, only the steady knowledge of what survival demanded. The battles would never end, the trials would never cease. But it remained, and that was enough. The valley lay still after the storm of battle. The air carried the weight of silence, broken only by the distant calls of scavenger birds that dared not yet descend. Electrosaurus stood at the heart of that silence, blood dripping from fresh wounds, its breath harsh yet steady. Victory was as yet the scars that lined his body told the truth of the cost. He turned from a fallen rival whose body lay twisted in the dirt. Its eyes, once filled with fire, were now dim, staring into a world that no longer answered. Survival had chosen one predator and left the other to the earth. Electrosaurus knew no triumph, only the instinctive pull of life pushing him forward. In his world, there was no glory, only the endless demand to endure. The carcass of the giant Tarbosaurus still loomed near, its size dwarfing even the predators who had fought over it. Flies already gathered around the wounds that had ended the Titan's reign. Its power now was nothing more than meat for the living. Electrosaurus moved toward it cautiously, every step measured. His body ached, his shoulder throbbed with each motion, yet hunger burned brighter than pain. He fed, carefully ripping strips of flesh from a massive body. Each bite restored his strength, though slowly, his wounds bleeding even as his muscles mended. The taste of the giant was heavy, bitter with the life that had once ruled the land. Yet in that meal there was power. With each mouthful, he felt the fire of survival burn brighter, the will to continue growing stronger. The sun climbed high, casting long beams of light across the valley floor. The blood on the earth glistened beneath its touch of crimson, reminder of the battles fought. The scavenger birds circled closer, their cries sharp and demanding. They waited for weakness, for the moment when the predator's strength faltered. But Electrosaurus lifted his head and snarled his roar, carrying across the cliffs. The birds scattered, for now unwilling to challenge the victor. When his hunger eased, he retreated to the shade of a rocky outcrop, his body pressing against the cool stone. The wind brushed over his wounds, stinging yet steadying. His eyes closed, but his mind remained sharp. Even in rest, danger never truly left. The world was filled with eyes waiting for weakness, claws waiting for the chance to strike. Hours passed, and the valley shifted. The herds that fled began to return, their shapes distant specks, moving cautiously across the ridges. They sensed the predator below, the scent of blood, the weight of death. Yet hunger drove them too, just as it drove everything that lived. Life continued around the valley, even as death still lingered within it. Electrosaurus stirred, lifting himself once more. His wounds would heal, those scars would remain. Each scar was a story, a mark of battles endured. His body carried the memory of every fight, every struggle written into flesh. They were reminders of what survival demanded and what it cost. The rival's carcass lay near, untouched by his jaws. He had no need to consume the fallen predator. It was not food to him, but a warning. The world did not forgive weakness, and it did not hesitate to take. He turned from it, leaving the body to the scavengers who would descend once he left. The valley was no longer a place to linger. Its soil reeked of blood, its air carried the scent of death. More predators would come, drawn by that smell. The battle was as yet. To stay would mean to fight again before his wounds had healed. Caution guided him as it always had. With one final glance at the field of giants, he moved toward the ridges. The climb was slow, his body heavy, yet his spirit unbroken. Each step carried him further from the echoes of roars and the taste of blood. As he reached the high ground, the wind shifted, carrying with it the smell of grasslands untouched by battle. It called to him, promising fresh hunts, new trials. The horizon stretched wide before him, endless and harsh. He paused at the ridge, his silhouette sharp against the setting sun. Behind him lay the valley of death, the place where giants had fallen and rivals had perished. Before him lay the unknown, filled with both danger and opportunity. He roared then, not for triumph, but for survival. The sound carried across the land, raw and defiant. It was a declaration that though the world was cruel, though every day demanded blood, he remained. The roars of others might one day silence his own, yet for now his voice cut through the air, fierce and unyielding. The scavenger birds descended at last of the valley, their wings folding as they fell upon the bodies. They tore at flesh, stripping away what remained. The land returned to its rhythm, the cycle of life and death spinning on. Yet on the ridges, a lone predator walked forward, his path his own, forged by hunger and fire. The sky burned orange and gold as the sun lowered. Shadows stretched long across the plains. Electrosaurus moved into that horizon, his steps steady, his body scarred, his spirit relentless. He had endured the storm, and he would face the trials yet to come. For in the world of ancient predators, survival was the only victory, and Electrosaurus still lived. Night crept across the land as the last traces of sunlight vanished behind the jagged peaks. The world grew still save for the whisper of wind through grass and the distant cries of creatures settling into shadow. Electrosaurus stood upon a ridge, his silhouette carved against the rising moon. Scars traced across his hide, gleaming faintly under the pale glow, each mark a silent record of trials endured. He looked out over the plains where herds moved like dark rivers in the distance. They grazed with caution, knowing the night carried danger, yet life demanded they continue. High above, an owl-like bird swooped low, its wings cutting the quiet air. The rhythm of survival pulsed everywhere, in every movement, in every sound. Electrosaurus drew in a long breath the scent of earth and life, filling his lungs. He no longer carried the exhaustion of the valley, though the memory lingered sharp and heavy. His steps were steadier, now his resolve shaped not by victory alone, but by the acceptance that survival was endless. There would always be rivals, there would always be hunger, yet there would always be the will to endure. He descended from the ridge, his body flowing into the darkness of the grasslands. The shadows embraced him, yet did not conceal the power in his stride. Every movement was deliberate balance, by instinct sharpened by struggle. The land itself seemed to open before him, vast and unyielding, as if acknowledging his claim. The moonlight stretched across the ground, catching in his amber eyes. For a moment the predator paused, lifting his head to the sky. The stars burned bright, countless lights scattered across the black expanse. In their glow he was both small and eternal, just one creature among many, yet a force written into the story of the world. He released a low growl that rose into the stillness of the night. It was not rage, not despair, but a promise. His journey did not end in the valley, nor here upon this plain. As long as breath filled his lungs, as long as hunger drove his steps, the story of Electrosaurus would continue. And in that promise he vanished into the night,